This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
She's the author of the bestseller Gods in Alabama, Joshilyn Jackson, on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Conversations. We are privileged to have with us Joshilyn Jackson. She's had a couple of big hits recently. Gods in Alabama, best-selling book. Also, The Girl Who Stopped Swimming on the New York Times bestseller list. And a brand new book entitled Backseat Saints. Joshilyn, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Backseat Saints, brand new book. What's it about?
Well, it's the story of a young woman named Rose Lally who, when she goes off to drop a friend at the airport, she runs into a gypsy there. And it's not a chance meeting. This gypsy is someone from her past who's kind of been stalking her.
Oh, boy.
You stalk somebody long enough, they're going to catch you. And this is the moment when she catches her. And the gypsy does a tarot card reading for her and says, "Look, Missy, this man you've married, this beautiful, abusive man you love, is going to put you in the ground unless you put him in the ground first." So Rose gets her Poppy's old 45 because she knows it's true. When somebody tells you something that you already know, she goes and she lays for her husband up at Wildcat Bluff, and that's the first 8 pages.
That's the first.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you put beautiful and abusive together.
Yeah.
Why?
Because she loves him and because he loves her. They love each other very much, but it is not a healthy or satisfying relationship.
What motivated you to come up with this story?
Well, I'll tell you, I get that question a lot just because it's so topical right now, especially with, all the stuff that's been going on, with the gossip magazines and all these celebrities are apparently beating each other up behind closed doors, which really, apparently. But for me, it wasn't the issue. For me, it was the character. Rose Lally was a minor character in Gods in Alabama, which was my first novel. And when I started writing that book, she was supposed to be in chapter 8, and her name was Jim Beverly's high school girlfriend. She was supposed to have 3 sentences. And she showed up in that chapter with a name, with a history, with an agenda. She took over the whole chapter, and she loved trouble. And trouble loved her right back. And that is fiction gold when you get a character like that. So she kind of spread out and got up in that book in 2 or 3 scenes. And she still wasn't done. She sort of wanted her own book. And now this is not a sequel. These books they're sort of companion books. You could read them in either order. Doesn't really matter.
Is she a character that can go past this book? I mean, could she be in another book?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I always said, it's really weird that I've written 2 linked books or related books because I always said I'd never write a sequel. I mean, people who've read my books know I beat people to death with tequila bottles. I shoot stuff. I blow up whole small towns. If you get all the way through running my books safe to the end and have some sort of hope and peace, I feel like I should leave you alone. You sort of earn the right. So I've always said I wouldn't write a sequel. But it's not a sequel because it doesn't pick up and it doesn't follow up on anybody. It's just a companion book. It's just a character from that book sort of gets her own book.
Your characters, the characters in your books, do you develop those characters prior to actually writing the story, or do they develop as the story goes along?
Oh, no.
In your head? Absolutely.
The character comes first. I mean, I'm a character-driven writer. What I don't know is the plot, which is weird because my plots are usually, I like plot. I like stuff to happen. I like a big old scoop of plot. But if I knew everything that was going to happen before I sat down to write the book, I think I'd be bored writing it. I'm not an outliner. But the characters, I've never written a book with a main cast that I haven't been thinking about for at least 7 years.
Really?
And one book, I started imagining 2 of the characters 18 years before I sat down to write the book.
Wow. So you know their personality traits beforehand.
And their relationships to each other. Like the way I write a book is, I have all these people in my head, like I'll see something or I'll hear a line and it'll start me imagining who would say that and what context are they in, or who drew that sign, or who would make this horrible clay pot and put it in their house. Something that I see will start me inventing a person. And I invent people all the time. And some of them stick with me. And then over the years, some of them start to seem related to other people. Like, oh, the woman who made that sign is married to that guy who made that hideous clay pot. And he's like this and she's like that. And they start to link up in my head. And eventually I have a cast. And at some point, one of these casts in my head will start to get louder, and I'll know that's who I'm going to write about next.
Are you one of these folks that every time you meet someone, you're constantly thinking, maybe they're a character somewhere along the way?
Yeah, it doesn't really come from people. It's weird. I'll tell you what it does come from, eavesdropping. I'm a terrible eavesdropper.
Really?
There's this great yoga class I love because it's on this grassy, it's an outdoor class, it's only when the weather's nice, but it's by this walking path. And I love it because the whole time you're doing yoga, people are walking past and you hear 2 or 3 lines of conversation with no context. And most of the time, you know, your head's behind your knee, so you don't know, you can't even see who's talking. But you'll just hear these 2 or 3 lines, and sometimes they're very intriguing, and I sit there the entire class trying to imagine what the context of that conversation is, who these people are. And of course, I mean, I write fiction. I lie for a living. None of the stuff in this book happened to me. I make this all up. But none of these characters are me, but they're all mine. So these things that I hear or see that start my imagination going will link up in some ways to my experience, especially on a thematic level, most of all. Because I write to sort of answer the kind of questions that I think we all have questions that sort of haunt us, the big overarching questions. And for me, the way to answer those is story. I mean, I'm the kind of girl that can't sit through a sermon, but if you tell me a parable, you've got me.
Interesting. Men or women, who makes a better character? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Interesting people, broken people make the best characters.
Broken people, and by that you mean?
Flawed people. People who have not necessarily made the best choices in their life, people who have flaws, people who, you know, the world's broken. Everybody in it's a little bit broken. And I'm not interested in white hats and black hats. I like whole people who some of them are trying to do the right thing and failing, and some of them aren't even trying, but they still have their good points. I don't like, you know, big black mustachioed villains taping anyone to the railroad tracks.
You like real?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Talking about flawed people, do you think that's why we as a society are so attracted to all the things that go on in Hollywood? In other words, the gossip magazines and all that. Do we like those flaws?
I guess. I mean, there's broken and then there's smashed.
Yeah, well, that may be true.
Yeah. There starts to get an edge of voyeurism there that I get very uncomfortable with. I don't like, I'm not comfortable with that. Like, I don't watch reality television. I find it to be kind of creepy. Yeah. And I'm not sure I want to know you that well, Kate. You know?
Yeah. Interesting you say that. I interviewed an actress recently who was not too keen on it either. But there seems to be a lot of people who are watching it.
I love theater. I love dramas on television. I love good movies. I love story. Right. But, you know, I like that remove where you can think about the thematic issues. I mean, people don't have thematic issues. People have problems, and they're heartbreaking. In a story, when it's removed from, you know, this is my actual friend Jane with cancer, you know, I think that's exploitive, and it's just invasive, and I don't know, it's creepy. Yeah,
I would sort of tend to agree with you on that. As you write your stories, how much research do you do in, I know it's a fiction book, but how much, I guess, nonfiction research do you do?
Tons.
Really? How do you go about doing that? I mean, where do you start?
I'm not a musty tome girl. I'm a go out and do it girl. You know, in The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, my third novel, you know, I usually have crime. I like, I have an element of a mystery in most of my books, but that was the first time anybody had ever gotten caught and I needed cops. So I went and hung out with cops. I didn't want to read books about cops. I wanted to go be with cops. For this book, Rose is, she likes guns. Rose really likes guns. And in some, you know, in some books, a gun is just a gun, a cigar is just a cigar. Not in this book. Rose likes guns. And I don't like guns at all. I think guns are creepy. But I needed to understand Rose's relationship with guns. So my dad and my brother are both airborne rangers, ex-Army guys. So they have guns. So I'm like, Daddy, you got to teach me how to shoot. And my husband took me skeet shooting, which I had never done, because I didn't know what kind of, I knew she liked guns, but I didn't know what kind of guns yet. So I went and tried shotguns, rifles. My brother took me out to a field and let me shoot pistols. And then I knew what kind of gun.
You knew that was it.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. awesome at shooting guns.
Do you like them better now?
Yes, I like them much better now. And we went out and we filled up these Pepsi bottles, because you don't shoot Coke in the South.
Oh yeah, that's right. And you live in Atlanta, so
yeah,
especially
you don't
there,
shoot
right?
Coke, man. You're gonna go shoot. You shoot the Pepsi bottles.
That's right.
So we filled up these plastic 2-liter Pepsi bottles, and we had a 20, like a Saturday night special at 22. We had a 38. We had a 45. We had revolvers and automatics, and he had a couple and he borrowed some. So we went out and we just shot this array of guns, and I found Rose's gun and I really liked shooting it. And I was good at it. Like and then he'd pick it up and all the water would be coming out of the Pepsi bottle. Like, wow.
Because the book, and not to get too serious on it, but it touches on domestic violence.
Yes.
Did you do research for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and I'm very easily distracted. Yeah, to be honest, Rose as a character made me want to write the book, but I knew she came with that baggage, and that was my biggest, impasse, the thing I didn't want to do because I didn't want to write about it. Because honestly, when I started, I didn't really have a lot of empathy for it. Sympathy, yes, but sympathy is good manners. And pity, yes, but pity there's a little bit of, it's patronizing a little bit. I feel sorry for you, but of course I would never be in that position, And so, and I knew this about myself, and you can't write a novel if you don't have empathy for your characters. I mean, not a good one. So, so I started researching to see if I could take this on. And the more I talked to people who had come out of this situation, or who were coming out of this situation, or who were trying, and the way they go back, and the more I spent time with these people and came to understand that they were these whole people, and this was one facet of their lives, and they were a whole array of personalities, but some of them were very funny, and some of them were very smart, and some of them, they all had their gifts, and they all had different paths that had sort of landed them here, but there were a few threads in common. And I guess I hadn't understood how, the way the pathology of the relationship works is you get very isolated and you don't have an easy way out. And for me, the moment that I found empathy was when I saw, in a way, that it's really just another face of all the ways we're self-destructive. Well, hi, I'm an ex-smoker. I can certainly, because, if you told me the world was ending tomorrow, I would go across the street to the 7-Eleven, get Camel Special Lights, and light up immediately. No, I'd be like, oh, really, tomorrow? You don't say. It was my favorite way to kill myself. I loved it. And, as a young woman, I flirted with eating disorders. It's the same thing. It's all these ways that we try to destroy ourselves, and you add that to a history where you're raised in a place, most of them, where this is what marriage looks like, this is what men are like, this is what you expect men to be like, and this is what you expect marriage to be like.
So those were the threads that sort of...
Those two things, and the last one was the way the man in the relationship will very oftentimes work to isolate the women and make them dependent financially and emotionally. So they don't have friends. They're not allowed to have friends. They usually end up cutting all ties with their family. And, when people sort of drop out and you call them and they don't call you back, you stop calling. And these women end up very, very isolated. And it was when I got to this place of empathy where I could see how, if these factors, I know that we all have our own favorite ways to hurt ourselves. I don't know anybody who's, my nephew wants to jump out of planes and fight fires. Okay. He's in fireman's college, and then he's going to jump school, so he could, okay. And we all have these things that we do, and if I had come out of that kind of a history, and if I didn't have my mom and my dad and my husband, well, my husband's super great, but obviously if I was in that kind of relationship, I couldn't call my husband out. But he's been my best friend for years too, so I have a whole network of people. And the more I met these women who were coming out of this situation, and saw how hard it was, I stopped having pity and I stopped having sympathy, and I was able to not only empathize with them, but really just admire them. Because if you can get out of this, you're a superhero. I mean, I met some amazing people who sort of, and I'm not interested in victims. Victims aren't interesting.
What was it that those women who got out of it, what did they do to break it? What did they break the chain?
A lot like, well, they had help. They had outside help. And they, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could, if I told you that, I would be telling you a great deal of the plot of the book. So,
okay, I gotta read the book.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I don't want to give any spoilers, but there were some common threads too in the women who did manage to get out. And my book is fictional, and it does have the engine of a thriller. So Rose gets out a little bit more violently and spectacularly, you know,
than most women.
Yeah,
do. Yeah. But let's go back a book or so to Gods in Alabama.
Yes.
What was that about?
It's the story of a young woman named Arlene Fleet, who, when she leaves her little hometown in Alabama and goes off to college in Chicago, she makes a deal with God. It's a pretty good deal for God. He gets 3 for 1. She's never going to tell another lie. She's going to stop fornicating with every boy she meets. And she will never set foot back in the state of Alabama. And all God has to do is keep the body of the man she killed hidden. So that's a pretty good deal. I always like to stop there and say that book is not autobiographical. I think it's really important to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and of course the guy that Rosemary is looking for Jim Beverly. Mm-hmm. And that's, I ended up, like, when Rosemary first appeared in Gods in Alabama, she was in chapter 8, but the way that things happen around her, like, she causes so much mess. I picked her up and put her in chapter 1 and rewrote all of Gods in Alabama to get Rosemary there starting trouble in the very beginning. And she shows up looking for Jim Beverly, which Arlene knows where Jim Beverly is, and God knows where Jim Beverly is. Nobody else knows where Jim Beverly is. So she sort of starts off the action in that book. She's the catalyst that makes everything go. And Rose is just that way. Things happen around her. And I guess, you know, after that book was done, I really thought I was done with everybody in it, because that's always how I've done it, World Without End, Amen. But what kept Rose alive for me was readers. It's weird. People who read Gods in Alabama, I'd go to libraries, bookstores, do interviews like this. I would always get questions about Rose, who's a very minor character. She's in 3 scenes. And there are these words I don't like to say. If you ask me a question, the answer I don't want to say is, I don't know, which I'd rather make up statistics than say I don't know. It's an incredibly obnoxious personality trait. I didn't realize how obnoxious it was until I had 2 children who both have it. So now I'm trying to learn how to say I don't know, because I understand that it's really obnoxious. But people would ask me these questions about Rose, and I would, instead of saying I don't know, I would go, and I'd think about it really quick and then tell them. So Rose kept building in my head. Like, I just kept spontaneously adding pieces of her. So she kept building that way. And then one night, this is literally like 3 in the morning, I sat bolt upright in the bed, and I grabbed my husband. I started shaking him. I was like, Scott, everything Rosemary Lally says in Gods in Alabama is a lie, and I know why she's really looking for Jim Beverly. And Scott went, it's 3 a.m. And I was like, sorry, never mind. And I got out of bed right then. I let him go back to sleep, and I started writing this book.
Awesome. How did you first become a writer?
Oh, I've always been a writer.
Really?
My mom has books that I published myself using the Crayola stapler method, you know.
No kidding.
Yeah, and they, I'm dating myself to say this, but when I was in middle school, that's when those blank books you always see in the bookstores first came out. And I filled reams of them with really terrible, like, horror novels. I loved Stephen King, still do. But I don't write horror, but in middle school I did. Terrible, terrible horror. Like, I filled an entire blank book with a novel called Don't Go Into the Woods, in which every character sort of one by one went into the woods and no good came of it, you know.
So did you always know, did you know you're going to be a published author? Was that just something you had within?
I don't know. I always knew I'd write. I always knew I would be a writer. I was realistic enough about the industry and educated myself enough to understand that it's very, very competitive. And, you know, I didn't know anybody. You know, and you kind of hear these rumors like, oh, it's all about who you know. But that's really not true. I mean, it really is about the book. If you write the right book at the right time, and it's the best book you can write, and it's the book only you can write, and it's good, it'll find a home. And if it doesn't, then you write another book.
So many people dream of having a published book. How did it happen for you? You wrote your first book. How did you first get published?
Oh, well, Gods in Alabama, my first novel, is actually my third novel. Oh. Yeah, I wrote another book. You know, I would send it. I got an agent. I mean, I got the Writer's Market books. I wanted to be a writer. So I started educating myself about how one went about doing that, which is, you know, people don't do that. They're like, oh, I want to be published. But, I wonder how you do that. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, there's a whole section on it at the bookstore. So you just get the Writer's Market book and it tells you how to do it. And so it tells you, you know, you need an agent. You either are going to go with a small press or you need an agent. Well, I thought I'm not very pushy, and I'm just not. I thought I would do better with an agent. I didn't think I would be good at going to publisher after publisher and saying, would you like my book? No? Okay. I mean, I thought that would be soul crushing. Right. And I thought it would be better to have that buffer. Right. Then he could be pushy and I could sit in Georgia and write books. So you go to New York and be pushy, I'll be here writing a book. So I did the query letter, just like everything, you know, hi, my name is Joshilyn Jackson, I write novels, I think they're real nice. You know, would you like to sell them to a big New York publishing house? And I didn't know to send them out in batches. Like the way you're supposed to do it is you send out 15, and if nobody asks to read the whole manuscript, then your query's no good, and you need to start over. I sent out 160 of those things the first time I did this, and I got 159 no thank yous. Wow. And it was for a joint project, a series of children's books I was working on with a friend of mine, and it was very depressing to send out 160 at once, because there was this long period of time where every couple of days I'd go to the mailbox and there would be like a sheaf of 7 or 8 rejections. So we started we made it a ritual. I was like, okay, when I get 10, I'll call you. So I wouldn't open them. I'd just set them aside till 10 had accumulated. Then I'd pour like a country club pour of wine. Go out to the porch, let her get her country club pour, and she'd go out to the porch. And I would ceremoniously open these rejection letters. And as we read them, we would mock that rejecting agent's taste and parentage, and just sort of in a comforting kind of way. And we were just reviling this one poor guy when we got about halfway through and realized he was like, I'm very interested in this project. Like, oh, we take it back, we take it back. Wow. So yeah, and he became my agent, and he's been my agent ever since. So far you have written Gods in Alabama, The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, Between Georgia, and then this Backseat Saints. What's on the horizon? I'm about 2/3 of the way through a book called In Season, which The Girl Who Stopped Swimming is a ghost story and a murder mystery. I mean, the books I write I would call them mainstream fiction or commercial fiction. They're not genre fiction. They're not straight up murder mysteries, but I like to use a commercial engine because I like plot. So it's a character-driven book, but the engine inside that car this book has the engine of a thriller, that book has the engine of a murder mystery. And so they're kind of darker books. So I wanted to write a comedy. So In Season is a comedy, but it's my kind of comedy, which means it starts when the Slocum family goes to put in a backyard pool and they dig up a 15-year-old skeleton. So, Will you always write fiction, or might you write nonfiction at some point? I have tried to write nonfiction, but I end up lying. So I have to stop. I don't want to pull a million little pieces. I just see how... What do you mean you lie? I just see how I could make the story better. Oh, okay. Just seems like, okay, I know this is true, but that's kind of dumb. What if this had happened instead? Wouldn't that be a much better story? Right. 15 minutes later, I've changed everything beyond all recognition, and it's starting to work in ways that are thematic instead of truthful. Are writers, as a general rule, are some fiction writers and some just nonfiction, and that's kind of what they do, or can the two easily cross? I think a lot of people can do. I mean, God touched my brain right here with one finger, and I can write novels. I wanted to be a playwright very badly. My plays aren't that good. They're funny, but there's no there. Yeah. I would like to write short fiction. After you get 25,000 words into a short story and you're only about 1/4 of the way through, you have to accept that what you're writing is a novel. Right. I mean, I think it's because of what I read. I've been having a passionate love affair with the novel. When I was 9 years old, it started. Really? When I stole my mother's forbidden copy of Roots and read it cover to cover with a flashlight late at night, Alex Haley's Roots. Yeah. And I'm a novelist.
Yeah.
But there are lots of people who can do bunches of stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Who do you most admire out there as far as novelists are concerned?
Dead or alive.
Either.
Flannery O'Connor.
Right.
And now she's a brilliant short story writer. I mean, you know, her novels are good, but her short stories are just perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I can't do it, but I admire her. You know, Rose quotes Flannery O'Connor in this book. Rose is Catholic, which is, you know, I wanted to isolate her in a lot of ways. And if you live in the South, the rural South, rural Southern Catholics are, that's already isolating. So, but it was also a little bit of a tip to Flannery. I can call her that, we're close. Ms. O'Connor.
Are there possibilities that some of your books may be turned into movies?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always possibilities. I mean, I have a West Coast agent. We've sold film rights. After a while, they revert back to me if nothing happens, and then my agent goes and sells them again. There's actually there's a toast in Hollywood that is, may your rights always sell and your movie never be made. So we've done it. I mean, I would like it, but I don't have any desire for any level of control over that whatsoever. None. Yeah. I'm not interested in being involved in any way. Like if Michael Caine came to me tomorrow and was like, I want to buy the rights to Backseat Saints and I want to play Rose as a 60-year-old Scottish drag queen, I'd be like, awesome, write me a check. That sounds great. Love it. Go. Yeah. I don't want Michael Caine to come and tell me how to write a novel, and I don't want to tell Hollywood people how to write a movie. Yeah. I've learned it's not even the same thing. I've never seen a book made into a movie. That's never happened. What I've seen is movies based on books. Yeah. And I think the farther away I stay from that, the better. I would love to see it. I'd love to see it.
To see what they did, huh?
Yeah, but I don't have any vested interest in having any kind of control over that.
Wow. Getting short on time, but just out of curiosity, what do you enjoy the most about the process in about a minute?
Revising. I hate writing. I hate writing.
Really?
I've been doing it long enough to know that my drafts are no good, and it's embarrassing. Like I'm writing a sentence, I know it's bad. But I also know that it's like digging clay out of a muddy, hot creek bank. And then you get to your cool studio and you make it into something you love.
That's interesting. Joshilyn, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Has been a real pleasure. The name of the book, Backseat Saints. Joshilyn Jackson. She is a New York Times best-selling author, and as I mentioned before, she has Gods in Alabama, The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, and Between Georgia. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Come back when the new one comes out.
Sure thing. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you so very much for watching this edition of Conversations. You can find us on Facebook. Just search out Conversations with Jeff Weeks, and we're also online, WSRE.org/conversations. Thanks so much for watching. Take very good care of yourself. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Great job.